Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor, is on set with me to discuss this. So for our international viewers, give us some explainers. What is going on here?
Yeah. Let's just say it's complicated, right? You're absolutely right that U.S. universities have always been historically staging grounds for the broader debates playing out in American society, often in very sharp manifestations. And the Israel-Gaza war has really showcased these divisions and the clashes and the sort of spirit, the hue and cry of free expression with a vengeance, in a sense. There has been absolutely a surge in support for the Palestinian cause.
Which is new.
Which is new on university campuses. And there are a lot of Jewish groups in America on these same campuses, and not all of them, a lot, who believe that it has often manifested itself, the support for the Palestinian cause they feel they've been on the receiving end of often Jewish groups, violence or violent rhetoric. And this is where you've had, it's right now rebounding right into the highest offices at a lot of these elite universities, the office of the presidents. You had, as you mentioned, a congressional hearing last Tuesday, so we're going back almost a week. And the hearing was led by a staunch Republican, a MAGA supporter. She's a Republican from New York named Elise Stefanik. She is today seen by many as one of Donald Trump's biggest cheerleaders. Some would say she has a political agenda, but the point of this hearing was she pointedly asked the presidents of 3 universities over 4 hours of testimony. It was a long hearing. We're talking about Harvard, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and the University of Penn. She asked them whether groups or people or protests that call for the genocide of Jews would amount to a violation of your school rules, of your school policies against harassment, bullying, so on and so forth. And
was this a hypothetical, or were there really calls for the genocide of Jews on U.S. universities?
This is a good question. There are certain protests where you've had very sharp calls in favor of intifada. Intifada obviously being a reference to Palestinian uprising.
Right, but not necessarily
genocide.
Genocide of Jews.
There have been varying protests on various campuses, but these university presidents were basically being asked how their schools would react to those types of calls.
So a hypothetical.
They were seen, and I have to use the word, they were seen by many as equivocating in their answers, especially the president of Harvard University. She was sworn in just 6 months ago. She's she's a woman black president of Harvard, and she was seen as equivocating. She struggled to answer the question. She answered in a very legalistic way. She and others were prepared for this testimony by a consulting firm full of lawyers who perhaps over-prepped them. Their answer was very legalistic.
But because this is about free speech.
Absolutely. But when asked by Elise Stefanik, this GOP questioner, whether or not Harvard would tolerate these types of calls, she would say it depends on the context. She was asked time and again. Stefanik repeated the question. She says it depends on the context before finally saying clearly, obviously, calls to the genocide of the Jews would amount to intimidation and harassment. And of course, I don't support that. That was lost in the sound bites, the social media firestorm that brewed afterwards. Claudine Gay has been under a lot of fire right now by donors, by alumni of Harvard, by a lot of politicians as well. Pressure for her to resign. Faculty have been more rallying behind her. The Harvard Corporation is set to meet later today to basically wrestle with her fate. I will note that the University of Pennsylvania president, a woman named Elizabeth Magill, she did resign on late Saturday. So what's interesting here is I want to show you the headline. In the Harvard Crimson is the student newspaper, and it underlines it. I think we had a little screen grab from their website. "I am sorry" was the statement they put up there. That was Claudine Gay basically realizing after she made these remarks, she knew how they sounded. Claudine Gay obviously doesn't tolerate genocide of Jews or people calling for it. But under this questioning, in a 90-second exchange out of 4 hours of testimony, her remarks did strike many as essentially advocating calls for genocide, which she vehemently says absolutely under no circumstances. What she thought she was doing and says she has been doing is she's very, very much vigilant about trying to keep alive the spirit of freedom of debate. And she doesn't want to stifle debate and voices on universities.
Right, universities that are known for being, quote, safe spaces, right, for these kinds of discussions to take place.
Traditionally, yes, but it's getting more and more difficult. I will say that Republicans, especially in the U.S., have long bashed a lot of the so-called elite universities, the so-called Ivy League universities, as being these sort of bastions of, in the past, it was promoting all these ideas of social justice. Back in the 90s, when I was at university, it was political correctness was the big thing, those far-left, politically correct universities. Today, it's about wokeism. And what they're basically saying, their argument now is what's happening here shows that these elite universities, their far-left agenda is very racialist. What they accuse Republicans of doing, of stifling debate, of being against free expression. They say the far left is doing it themselves by basically failing to confront outright anti-Semitism. So they're holding up the mantle, especially this GOP Republican Stefanik, as the great defender of the Jews, up against the left establishment who would leave Jews open as free targets to be bashed by Palestinian supporters.
Well, we don't have any time left, so unfortunately we'll have to leave it there. But I did want to say one thing.
Yeah.
That in my opinion, the worst part about this whole thing is the effect that it's having on the futures of the students
And I'll just
that are in those universities. Some of whom have been blacklisted by donors, by business owners, by big people who are famous and who have lots of supporters on Twitter.
Let me tell you the ultimate irony here. I mentioned political donors, alumni, and politicians who are all weighing in on this debate. Elise Stefanik herself tweeted this morning, 1 down, 2 to go, a reference to she hopes that the Harvard president and the MIT president will have to step aside and resign like the U of Penn president. The students are right now in their full December preparing for exams. They're studying, they're in their libraries, getting ready for exams. They are not intimately involved in the debate on the level. It's been highly politicized. There's a heavy ideological and a heavy culture war component to this debate. So there's the debate of what was actually said and the debate of how it's playing out in American media and on the political stage right now.
And in the lives of these young people who often are less than, 22 years old.